Hi all, in this session we are going to learn about Azure Virtual Network. Here we can learn what is Azure Virtual Network, how to create virtual network, what are the different types of security features which we have while creating the virtual network. Everything we are going to discuss in detail, and I am going to show it to you in a practical manner as well. Let us quickly understand what do you mean by Azure Virtual Network. Regarding this, as we had discussed already in the last sessions, but anyway, we will have some kind of quick look over these things. Here, Azure Virtual Network is a representation of your customized network in the cloud. Means, if you are going to define your own customized network in the cloud, that will be called as virtual network. Why we need to create? In order to create the logical boundary. Up to now, we had created VMs in multiple times by using the default network which has been provided by the IT. If we don't have any customized network with us, then we can use the Azure default network in order to create the resources. Then what is the difference between Azure default network and customized network? Here, the Azure default network is going to provide security but not privacy. If you define your own customized network, then you can set security along with privacy. Because of that, whenever organization is going to deploy their infrastructure over cloud, before that, as a prerequisite, it is going to create some kind of virtual network. Inside of the virtual network only, they are going to create their project resources. Fine. So here, once I had designed my virtual network, the responsibility will be taken care by the Azure. Means how you want, you can design your virtual network accordingly. Here, the Azure is not going to you charge for virtual network creation in the cloud. So based on the resources which you had created over the virtual network, the Azure is only going to charge for the resources usage only. And for creating virtual network, the Azure is not going to charge you. And the resources, where you are going to create the resources, you are going to create the resources inside of virtual network. And in the last session, we have already discussed, we have two types of versions of there, IPv4 and IPv6. And subnet is a part of virtual network. It is a kind to manage the or organize the virtual network. Subnet is a smallest part of virtual network. It is used for better organization of virtual network. And regarding IP notation, we had already discussed. So, and we have different types of IP address are there: class A, class B, class C, class D, class E, class F. And class A, class C, class B are the IP address generally we are used. And coming to class E and class F are generally used for research and development purpose by government organization. It is not going to allocate to any user. Only we are using class A, class B, class C. Class E, class EF are used for defense, broadcast. There are a lot of things. So it is not allocated to normal users. Fine. So quickly I'm going to log into the Azure portal, and here just refresh it. So right now I'm in Azure portal. So the first and foremost thing, if I want to create any resource, what I need to create? I need to create the resource group. Just click on create and set the resource group name as RG1. Click on review plus create. Just click on create. Here you are going to create the resource group. The name of the resource group RG1 and the resource location is Australia East. Once the resource group has been successfully created, then just click on virtual network. Here if you are not able to see, then here by using the universal search bar, you can be able to find out the virtual network service. Here we can say the virtual network is a IaaS service offered by the Microsoft service. Means it is a kind of infrastructure as a service, just like VM storage account, like it is also kind of IaaS, infrastructure as a service. Fine. And right now I don't have any customized networks which I had defined here. So I am going to create the virtual network. Just click on create. Here it is asking you to select the subscription. as I'm going to select the subscription pay as you go, and I'm going to select the resource group 1, the RG1 which I just created. I need to set the name for the virtual network, VNet name. Guys, one more thing, please remember, whenever you created any kind of resource in Azure, by default these things will come under default. Means you need to select the subscription, you need to select the resource group, you need to select the resource group name, you need to set the location. So without these things you will not be able to create any resource in Azure. Okay, this is the primary things. And click on next. Here, coming to the security, it is going to offer multiple security options in order to provide security to your resources which you are going to create inside of this virtual network. Means you are defining your own network. Inside of your network, what you are going to do, you are going to create the infrastructure. On top of the infrastructure, you are going to run your project services. If you want to protect your resources, how you will be able to do? With the help of the security options which has been provided by the Azure, you need to set the options accordingly based on your requirement. Here, if you enable this virtual network encryption, what will happen? If you enable this virtual network encryption, it is going to encrypt the traffic which is traveling within your virtual network. Means if you create any kind of virtual network, you are going to create multiple n number of resources inside of your virtual network. These resources can be able to communicate with each other. Yes, whatever the resources which you are going to create inside of a virtual network, by default it will be able to communicate with each other. Here the traffic will be routed. Means if they are communicating, the traffic is there. So if you want to encrypt the traffic within the virtual network, then you can enable this option. By default it has been disabled. If you want, you can enable the option. What will happen if you enable this? It is going to provide some kind of enhanced security feature. Even though the traffic which is routed between your resources inside of your virtual network is also encrypted. Generally, the network traveling or the network traffic traveling from your virtual network to the internet, by default it will be encrypted because of. So if you are accessing some kind of public internet, there is some kind of issues. Maybe there is a chance the malware will be introduced into the, or the data will be held or stored by hackers while traveling. So in order to avoid that, by default we are going to encrypt our data while it is going to traveling. So here, if you want to encrypt the data which is inside of your virtual network as well, then you can enable this option. Otherwise you can disable this option. And Azure Bastion. So regarding Azure Bastion, if you understand, if I created any virtual machine, how I will be able to connect? Suppose if it is a Windows machine, with the help of RDP protocol, I can be able to access the machine. Suppose if it is a Linux machine, with the help of SSH protocol, I can be able to access the machine. But here my requirement is, without using the default remote desktop protocols, I just want to access the machine. How that will be possible? Here the Bastion comes into picture. With the help of TLS, means with the help of the browser, I can be able to access the machine which I want to access. But here the RDP or SH is not to be enabled. Even though the missions RDP SH is by default disabled, but with the help of the Azure Bastion, I can be able to access those missions, even though that is Windows mission or Linux mission. Here, generally, without having the public IP of mission, is it possible to access the mission? Obviously, that is not possible with the help of RDP or SSH. But in this Azure Bastion scenario, what will happen? Even though the server or mission or virtual mission didn't have the public IP associated with them, with the help of the Azure Bastion, I can be able to securely accessing the VM. That kind of possibility we will have with the help of Azure Bastion. Here if you read the comment, Azure Bastion is a paid service that provides secure RDP or SSH connectivity to your virtual machine over TLS, transport layer security. When you connect via Azure Bastion, your virtual machine do not need a public IP. Means Here, even though the virtual machine which you are going to create didn't have the public IP, with the help of Azure version, you can be able to connect or access the virtual machine which do not have the public IP. Here, the requirement is public IP is not required. If I am going to use the Azure version, fine. Firewall, Azure firewall. Generally, as you heard about the firewall, what is the purpose of firewall? In on-premises also, we have the firewall is there. Why? It is used to protect the network from the fake traffic. Means in Azure firewall, we are going to develop some policies. Based on the policies, it is going to allow traffic or deny the traffic. If there is any suspected traffic is there, the firewall is used to avoid those traffic. Means if I allow some kind of fake traffic or malicious traffic inside of my network, what will happen? It is going to hack my virtual network or physical network. If you are using a firewall in on-premises, it is a physical network. If you are going to use the firewall in Azure, that will be called as Azure firewall. Firewall is same. Where you are going to use the firewall service is the matter. Here, the Azure firewall is a managed cloud-based network security service that is used to protect your Azure virtual network resources. Generally, whatever the security feature which we are going to select, why we are going to select? In order to protect the resources which we are going to create inside of our Azure virtual network. And coming to the Azure DDoS network protection, it is a kind of distributed denial of services. It is a kind of service which we are going to enable in order to protect the resources from the fake traffic. What will happen? Simply read this. Azure DDoS is also a paid service. Just like everything, whatever the option which is showing to here, everything is a paid service only. What will happen? By default, it is not going to enable. You need to enable if you want to secure, if you want to provide enhanced security to your resources, then you can set the options accordingly. Suppose if you click the, I'm going to show to you later, guys, just a moment. Here, just please understand, Azure DDoS is a kind of paid service that offers enhanced DDoS mitigation capabilities via adaptive tuning, attack notification, and telemetry to protect against the impact of DDoS attack for all protected resources within the virtual network. Simply, it is also kind of security feature which we are going to enable to protect your resources from the DDoS attacks or distributed denial of service attacks. Here, so let us have a overlook. Suppose if you enable this option, what will happen? If you enable this option, you must need to be enable the accelerated networking for your VMs. While creating the VM, you need to enable the virtual network acceleration. Otherwise, it is the virtual net without accelerating network. If you enable the VM, it is not going to work in this virtual network encryption network. Remember this, because I am going to show to you same thing. Suppose if you want to show to you right now, I am going to duplicate this quickly. While creating any virtual machine, you will have some kind of option, accelerated network. Suppose if I selected the accelerated network, here just click on, just go to home, just create virtual machine. Here create, here go to disks. Here you have option where the option is go into network. Here enable accelerating network. If you click here, enable low latency and high throughput of the network interface. So in order to enable the accelerated networking, first of all, what you need to do? You need to enable this virtual network encryption. Here clearly it has mentioned virtual network must have Axel networking enabled. Okay, if I enable this feature, I need to enable the accelerated networking to be enabled in the virtual network missions, where I am going to create the virtual machine inside of this virtual network. And Azure version, if you click here, it is going to show to you something. Here you need to set the Azure version host name. Whatever the name you want, you can set the host name accordingly. And the Azure Bastion public IP address is there. Means here the virtual machine which I want to access with the help of Azure Bastion is not required the public IP, but the Azure Bastion is required the public IP. Why? Because so the Azure Bastion has a public IP. With the help of the Azure Bastion public IP, I can be able to access the virtual machine. It is simply like a jump server. So what do you mean by jump server? We will have some kind of session on the upcoming session. So jump server is nothing but if I want to connect one server, before connecting to the server, I am going to connect to the jump server. From the jump server, I can be able to access the mission which I want to access. This is the purpose of jump server. Instead of connecting the required mission or target mission directly, with the help of the jump server, I can be able to access the target mission. Okay, if you enable the Azure Bastion, so you need to set the Bastion host name and you need to set the Azure Bastion public IP as well. Here what it will happen, so if you create the Azure Bastion, it will be tagged an instance to the virtual network. So with the help of the Azure Bastion IP, you can be able to connect to the required or targeted virtual missions. Here firewall, this is the one of the costliest component in Azure, guys. So if you enable this option, you need to set some kind of firewall name and subnet and tier. Which tier means here we have three tiers of the basic, standard, premium. So which tier you want? So based on that, the Azure is going to charge you. And here you need to define some kind of Azure policies or firewall policies. So here in policies as well, we have three different types are there, like basic policies, standard policies, premium policies there. So based on the policies which you are going to define, the firewall is going to filter the traffic accordingly. Just disable this option. So based on your requirement, you are going to enable these options. And for these services, either Azure Bastion or Azure Firewall, so whenever you are going to create these services, by default one subnet will be created, because of I need to create a dedicated firewall in order to use these services like Azure Bastion or Azure Firewall. So I need to create a dedicated firewall. Okay, just click on next. Here I am going to disable each and every option. It is not required because of as I'm going to create these resources for lab purpose. So I don't want to provide such kind of security options to my resources which I am going to create inside of this resource group or virtual network. So that's why I just disable this option. By default it has been disabled state only. If you want to enable, you can enable. Guys, here the Azure is going to provide you lot of opportunities. How we are going to use the opportunities? It's purely based on your requirement. If you have the requirement, you can use. If you don't have the requirement, you can exclude. That is purely your choice only. Just click on next. And here, this is the address space, guys. So we had discussed already in the last session. So first of all, we need to declare the which address space. Means here the entire virtual network is going to use the 10.0.0.0/16. Here in this address range, I will get 2 power 16 IP addresses, like 65,536 IP address I will get. This will be called as mask bits. Here guys, please understand, the mask bits are inversely proportional to the host bits. Means based on the mask bit only, the IP address count will be decided. If I select the mask bit as 16, I will get 65,536 IP address. If you select 17, the count will be reduced. I am going to show it to you guys in a practical session. Just have a look. So earlier it is a count is 64,000, but whenever I had increased the mask bit, the host count has been automatically decreased. Again I am going to increase 18. Then again it has been decreased. Again I am going to increase 24. Then you will get only 256 IPs only. Based on the IP notation, based on the mask bit, the IP address are changing dynamically. These are inversely proportional to each other. While creating virtual network address space, make sure guys, based on the IP's requirement, you are going to create the virtual network space and subnets as well. Here I am going to select the 16, which comes by default. Here if I am going to use the 10.0.0.0/16, Means here in this particular virtual network, I can be capable to hold 65,534. Means 536 IP address. Out of those, some IP address has been used by some other services. Then these many IP addresses we can be able to use in this particular VNet. Here, as I told to you, if you use some kind of Azure Bastion service, by default one subnet will be created. In this subnet, I am not supposed to create any other resources. It is purely dedicated for that particular Bastion subnet only, Bastion service only. Here by default it is going to create, otherwise here I am not going to enable this option, so that's why I can be able to delete. In the similar way, Azure firewall as well, we are going to create some kind of dedicated subnet. Inside of this dedicated subnet, I am not supposed to create any kind of other resources. Here I am going to delete it because of here there is no requirement with that, simply. Okay, and without having single subnet, you can't be able to create any virtual network. By default, you must and should need to create at least one subnet while creating the virtual network. Here by default I will get one default subnet. It is going to start from 10.0.0.0 to 10.0.0.255, means here /24. Here indicates in this subnet I can be able to put 256 IP addresses. Suppose if you want to create one more subnet, just click on here, add subnet. Here the subnet purpose, so for which purpose you are going to create. Suppose if you want to put the Azure Bastion, you are going to select the Azure Bastion. If you want to put Azure Firewall, you can select the Azure Firewall. Here we have 5 things are there. These 5 things, if you are going to create these 5 services, you must and should need to dedicate this subnet to that particular service only. You are not supposed to create any other resources in this dedicated subnet. And right now here my requirement is not about these 5 resources. So here my requirement is default. So that's why I'm going to continue with the default. Here you need to set name. So here I'm going to name the subnet 1 and include IPv4 address. OK. Here I'm going to mention the starting IP, the 10.0.0.0 to 10.0.0.255. It has been already used by the default IP address. So the rest is what? From I am going to start from 10.1.0.0 to 10.1.255, 255.255.255. So this is the IP range which I will get by using this address space 10.0.1.0/24. Okay. Here how will get 10.1.0, 1.1, 1.2 like that, 255.255, not 1.255. I will get these many IPs by using this IP notation 10.0.1.0/24. These many IPs I will get. Okay, fine. Come down. Here I am not going to enable the IPv6. By default it has been grayed out. Here it is not requirement. I am going to use or continue with the IPv4. It will fulfill my requirement. And private subnet. Private subnet enhances security by not providing default outbound access. Here what will happen? By generally, if you create any kind of resource, by default it can be enabled with the outbound traffic. Means if you are going to create the resources in the Azure default network, by default the resource which you are going to create instead of the default network, by default it is going to access the outbound traffic. Here if you are going to create any resource inside of the subnet, means purely it is restricted to that particular subnet only. It is not going to allow to access any kind of outbound access. Here with the help of private IP address, how it can be able to access the outbound traffic? It can't possible. But if I want to enable to access the internet with the help of private IP address, what I need to do? Either I need to use explicitly grant outbound access, otherwise I can be able to enable with the help of NAT gateway. NAT gateway use the resource with the help of public IP, with the help of private IP. It can be make access the use of internet with the help of network gateway, NAT gateway. So this is the purpose of NAT gateway. So here I am not going to create this subnet as a private subnet. I just disable this option, NAT gateway. If you are enable this option, you need to select the NAT gateway. when you need to select the NAT gateway, if you want to make the resource by using the private IP, need to access the internet, you are going to use NAT gateway. Otherwise you don't have such kind of requirement, you can disable that. Here NSG, network security group, it is going to set what are the inbound, it is going to set the rules for your network, which traffic is allowed, which traffic is denied. So with the help of the energy rules, we can define the network rules. Routing table, it is going to define the routes, how the traffic need to be routed. We are going to define here with the help of routing table. Service endpoints, here create service endpoint policies to allow traffic to specific Azure resources from your virtual network over service endpoints. Here, if I want to route traffic to the any other resource, here the requirement is, if I want to route or allow the traffic to any specific Azure resource from my virtual network, what I will do, I am going to create one service endpoint. So from the through the service endpoint, it is going to route the traffic to the specific Azure resource. So in those scenarios, you are going to select service endpoint. Here, if you have service point, you can select, otherwise you need to create. So here we have a lot of options. So here we need to select the service endpoints accordingly. Coming to the subnet delegation, so here you don't have any kind of requirement, so you can include. So subnet delegation and network policy for private endpoints. The network policy affects the type of network policies that controls traffic going to the private endpoints in this subnet. So it is purely used for specific kind of requirements. Like if I want to highly restrict my environment, then I am going to use the endpoints. So network policies that controls traffic going to private endpoints. Here the traffic will be controlled with the help of private endpoints. So there are a lot of advanced features offered by the cloud. So while we creating, so we can select the options accordingly based on the things or based on the policies which you are going to define in this virtual network. Your resources will be able to communicate accordingly. Here click on just click on add, then what will happen, the subnet one will be added. Here the range of the subnet one is 10.0.1.0 to 10.0.1.255. So in this IP range, okay, and in this way we can be able to create the subnet. Right now I have two subnets are there in my virtual network. Just click on next. Tags, as you know, tags, it is optional but it plays very crucial role. So if you want, you can set the tags. Just click on review plus create. It is going to validate your virtual network, and once the validation has been successfully passed, it is going to enable the option create. Just click on create, then your virtual network is going to deploy soon. So in this way we can be able to create the virtual network. And here, as I already showed to you, there are different types of security options which we have. Based on our requirement, we are going to select those security options accordingly. If you see here in overview, you have the resource group name is AzureVNet. You had created the virtual network in the region Australia East, as it is a pay-as-you-go subscription, and the address space is 10.0.0.0/16. Here I can be able to put 65,536 IP address and DNS servers. Here I am going to select the Azure provided DNS servers. Suppose if you have any customized DNS service in your organization, you can configure accordingly. And here BGP is not at all configured. If you want to configure the BGP community string, you can be able to connect. And this is the virtual network ID. And here a lot of things is there. So right now my VM is ready. So my virtual network is ready. If you want to create, here it is going to replicate here. Just refresh here. Suppose, so earlier without selecting the virtual network, simply we are going to create the virtual machines. But right now, while creating the virtual machine, I am going to show it to you guys. Here if you click on virtual network, here, yes, the VNet one is the customized network which I just had created right now. And here it is asking you in which subnet you want to create. Here I have the default subnet is there, and along with the default subnet I have the one more subnet. The name of the subnet is subnet 1 and public IP. So here these options we will have already discussed. So in this way, once the virtual network is created, it is going to replicate, and you can select those virtual network while creating the Azure resources. Fine. And one more thing, guys. So the VNet is at region level only. We cannot span across multiple region. Means if you are creating one network, if you are creating one virtual network in the specific region, it is limited to that particular region only. It cannot span across multiple regions. It is limited to that particular region only. And one more thing, up to 1000, up to 1000 virtual networks I can be able to create under one subscription, not more than that. Azure is allowing you to create 1000 virtual networks in a subscription. And if you want to see how many devices has been connected, then where you are going to select, here go to settings. Here you can be able to see each and everything. If you want to change the address space, from here you can be able to change the address space. Suppose later I change my thought, I am going to put 18. Just click on save. It is going to change, but right now I am not going to change, but it is not at all recommended way. So once you declare the virtual space or address space, just please be continue with the same. If you change, otherwise it is going to create some kind of impact, because of if you are creating any subnets in that address space, it is going to be impacted. So that's why please be focused, guys. And if you click on the connected devices, whatever the devices which are created under this virtual network, it is going to repeat here. In this session you will get to see all the devices which had been created inside of this virtual network. And coming to the subnets, here you have two subnets. The first one is default subnet and second one is subnet 1. And Bastion, I just disable this option. If you want to enable this option, from here you can be able to create the Bastion. Here what will happen if you enable this option? Azure Bastion protects your virtual machines by secure and seamless RDP and SSH connectivity without need of exposed to the public IP address. Okay, what it is going to do? It is going to deploying will automatically create it is going to create one Bastion host, means Bastion virtual machine in the subnet in your virtual network. Okay, so here you can ignore this. And DDoS protection, as we had disabled, if you want enable you can enable. Firewall also we had disabled, if you want you can enable here. And Microsoft Defender, here we have a lot of things. Network manager coming to, if you want to create any kind of network manager you can be able to create here. And the DNS servers, so by default I am going to select with the default Azure default, which has been provided by the Azure. Suppose if you have any customer or in your organization you have DNS servers are there, suppose you can select accordingly. Here in the custom you can select, just click on custom, you can select the IP address of your DNS server, then accordingly your DNS server will be added to this service. Here I am going with the default because of right now I don't have any DNS servers, as I just created for lab purpose. Okay, and here peering connections. So regarding peering connections, so we will discuss on the upcoming sessions. So peering is nothing but establishing connection between two different virtual networks in the same region or different regions. So service endpoints, regarding this we will have a quick look on in the upcoming sessions. So how you create the service endpoints, what is private endpoints, as we had already told to you. So service endpoints is going to allow traffic to the another resources from the service endpoints. Private endpoints generally it is used for the network traffic control. Okay, properties, if you click on the properties then you will be able to see the name is VNet1, the location is Australia East, the resource group name is RG1, what is the subscription ID, what is the resource ID, what is the resource group ID. So everything you can be able to see from the properties. If you click on the logs, if you want to lock then you can lock the resource, but it is not required right now, so just wait. So I just ignore it. So in this way we can be able to create the virtual network, and we had overlook about the different features which we have in virtual network as well. Okay, so we will I hope you guys understood the session, and I will meet up you in the next session with the topic, new topic, guys. Until signing off. Thank you guys. Bye bye.